Hello everyone, welcome to beautiful Rome. From the time of Augustus, the Romans were bringing Egyptian obelisks to Rome, dozens of them. While today in Egypt there are only 5, in Rome we'll find as many as 13 of these mysterious ancient monoliths, including 8 Egyptian ones. Some of the largest obelisks once stood in Circus Maximus, but they're no longer here. Today, we're gonna find them all. Let's go! We're heading to Piazza del Popolo. The Flaminio obelisk was among the very first ones transported from Egypt to Rome. It all happened in 10 BC, after Augustus' victory over Mark Antony and Cleopatra. This giant piece of red granite measures 23 meters, 34 with the base, and weighs 263 tons. The inscription on the pedestal says, "When Imperator for the 12th, Consul for the 11th, and Tribune of the people for the 14th time, Imperator Augustus, son of the divine Caesar, dedicated this obelisk to the sun when Egypt had been brought under the sway of the Roman people." The obelisk dates back to the 13th century BC. Commissioned by the New Kingdom pharaoh Seti I, it was finished by his son Ramesses II and erected in Heliopolis, a religious center of the sun god Ra. The shaft bears the cartouches of Ramesses and his son Merenptah and an inscription of Seti I stating that he's the one who fills Heliopolis with obelisks that their rays may illuminate the temple of Ra, as well as his sons claiming to make monuments as innumerable as the stars of heaven. His works join the sky. When Ra shines, he rejoices because of the obelisks in his temple of millions of years. The lower part of the shaft displays the scenes of making offerings to the god. The Piazza del Popolo isn't, however, its original location. Augustus placed it in the Circus Maximus, place of chariot races, exactly its spina, a longitudinal strip inside the racecourse, so during the competitions the obelisk symbolized the sun and the chariots were orbiting around like planets. During the centuries the site fell into oblivion. The obelisk was covered by layers of mud. In the 16th century, Pope Sixtus V recovered the monument, which at that time was broken into 2 pieces, repaired it and moved to the present location, adding to the blank sides of the pedestal 2 inscriptions. The first translates to, "Moved the obelisk from the Circus Maximus, where Emperor Octavian Augustus had dedicated it to the sun by impious ritual, and where it lay as a miserable broken ruin, gave it back its original shape and dedicated it to the most invincible cross." The second inscription refers to its current location, opposite the church of Santa Maria del Popolo, being a witty wordplay referring to the original Augustan engraving. "I rise more august and happy in front of the holy temple of She, out of whose maiden womb during the reign of Augustus the Son of Justice was born." there's still much ahead of us. We must hurry because the Roman weather is not favorable today. In the meantime, please tap the subscribe button to help my channel grow. Thanks! St. Peter's Square, the heart of the Roman Catholic Church. In its middle, an Egyptian spire known as the Vatican Obelisk. It's 25.5 meters high, 41 meters with the pedestal, and weighs around 320 tons. In comparison to other obelisks in Rome, this one has been standing without any damage since Roman times. It was, however, relocated by only a few hundred meters from Nero's circus by aforementioned Pope Sixtus V, who explained, "Too many Christians have been martyred in the shadow of that stone. Saint Peter himself died there." Hence its location in front of the St. Peter's Basilica, which at that time was under construction. Sixtus was actually the one who initiated a great project of recovering ancient obelisks. He wanted to use them as landmarks to guide the pilgrims through Rome. Because of the absence of hieroglyphs, we don't know when and which pharaoh ordered its construction. What is certain is that the monument was transported to Alexandria, most likely from Heliopolis, sometime around 30 BC by order of the Emperor Augustus as a commemorative monument for his uncle Julius Caesar. Even today, although faded, an inscription on the pedestal reads, "To the divine Caesar Augustus, son of the divine Julius, and to Tiberius Caesar Augustus, son of the divine Augustus." More than 60 years later, in 37 AD, the monolith was brought to Rome by Caligula. Originally, instead of a cross and elements from the coat of arms of Pope Sixtus V, the obelisk was capped with a globe made of bronze. It was long believed that inside the sphere Caesar's ashes were to be found. It was, however, disproven during obelisk relocation. Today, the bronze cross includes the relic of Jesus Christ, most likely small pieces of the Holy Cross, to perhaps erase the obelisk's initial pagan origins, as also the inauguration of the obelisk's new location included an ancient exorcism liturgy, as confirmed by a fragment of the inscription on the northern side of the pedestal. At the top of one of the most iconic places in Rome, known as Spanish Steps, in front of the Church of the Trinità dei Monti, not Egyptian, but a Roman obelisk is towering over the Piazza di Spagna. It was most likely erected in the second half of the 3rd century AD by Emperor Aurelian. Its initial location was Gardens of Sallust, hence its name, the Sallustiano obelisk. The Gardens was a quiet and serene place near the city but isolated from its hustle and bustle. Nevertheless, the fall of the Roman Empire in the 5th century brought oblivion onto the gardens and onto the obelisk. Same as the pharaonic obelisks, it's made of red granite but measures only 14 meters in height.
Looking at the reliefs, it's obvious that this obelisk is rather a Roman interpretation of an ancient Egyptian obelisk than its actual copy.
As it turns out, the hieroglyphs were simply copied from the Flaminio obelisk. Setting aside their questionable artistic quality, some were carved upside down. Whoopsie! The Romans were placing the obelisks in the most spectacular sites, mainly circuses where chariot races were held, but also in front of their temples and mausoleums of emperors.
The area around Spanish Steps and the obelisk normally is so crowded, but today, thanks to the weather, I think so, its streets are empty.
So now I've got a little over a kilometer of walking to the next iconic ancient site in Rome. The famous Piazza della Rotonda and the Makuteo obelisk in front of the entrance to the Pantheon, a perfectly preserved temple from the 2nd century AD, the architectural masterpiece, which I'll show you in one of my next episodes. The obelisk is 6.3 meters high and actually made of red granite. It dates back to the reign of Ramesses the Great, which means that it's more than 3,300 years old. The obelisk got its name from the nearby church of San Macuto, where it was found in the 14th century and stood there up until the beginning of the 18th, when moved by the order of Pope Clement XI to the center of an already standing fountain. The inscription on the pedestal reads, Clement XI, Supreme Pontiff, decorated this fountain and square in the year of our Lord 1711, in the 11th year of his pontificate. Why was the obelisk found in the 14th century church? It's actually one of a number of obelisks which adorn the temple of Isis and Serapis, called Iseum Campense, located almost next to the Pantheon. The church of San Macuto is situated on its old premises. Although there were several temples dedicated to Isis and Serapis in Rome, this was the most important one. Altogether, 4 of its obelisks survived to our times, including this one. It's the smallest of all obelisks in Rome, standing on the famous pedestal of Master Bernini. Although the new religion of Isis and Serapis was forbidden in the second half of the 1st century BC, it became popular in the 1st century AD, especially among women from the Roman nobility. In 19 AD, a Roman knight, Decius Mundus, driven by lust, took advantage of this fact and, with the help of a few priests from the temple, made a woman named Paulina, wife of Saturninus, believe that the god Anubis himself fell in love with her and asked for a meeting in the temple. He disguised himself, and you can figure out the rest. When the Emperor Tiberius heard about this disgusting act, he ordered destruction of the temple, banished Decius Mundus, and executed the priests. The low chamber of the Parliament, former law court, and the obelisk of Montecitorio. Commissioned by the pharaoh Psamtik II, the 6th century BC, dedicated to the sun god. Like the Flaminio and the Vatican obelisks, this one was also brought from Egypt by Augustus in around 10 BC. Augustus used it as a pointer in some kind of an enormous solar device. It reached 160 meters at its widest point. Let's hear Pliny the Elder from the 1st century AD. Quote, "It was put to use in a remarkable way by Augustus to mark the sun's shadow and thereby the lengths of days and nights. A pavement was laid down for a distance appropriate to the height of the obelisk, so that the shadow cast at noon on the shortest day of the year might exactly coincide with it. Bronze rods let into the pavement were meant to measure the shadow day by day as it gradually became shorter and then lengthened again." The device, however, according to Pliny, worked correctly only for 30 years. Piazza Navona, which during antiquity served as the stadium for athletics competitions and could accommodate up to 20,000 spectators, Circus Agonalis. Today, in its center stands a masterpiece of Baroque art, the Fountain of the Rivers, designed by Bernini, with 4 marble figures symbolizing 4 major rivers of the world. Although the monumental needle is made of Egyptian red granite and its shaft displays hieroglyphs, it was commissioned by Emperor Domitian in the end of the 1st century AD, so it's another Roman obelisk. The monolithic spire reaches 16.5 meters, but the base almost doubles its height. The pyramidion, the uppermost piece of the obelisk, presents to us Domitian as an Egyptian pharaoh wearing 3 kinds of crowns: the crown of Upper Egypt, the crown of Lower Egypt, and Pshent, the double crown. The emperor's cartouche is to be found on the shaft and translates to "living image of Ra," even though its original location was the aforementioned temple of Isis and Serapis, and in the 3rd century it was moved to the Circus Maxentius outside the city, where it eventually fell into abandonment. Bernini wanted this exact obelisk above his fountain. Why? It was a nod to Domitian, the benefactor of Circus Agonalis. Two next consecutive obelisks are twins. They both adorn the entrance to the mausoleum of Augustus and his family. The monumental tomb was one of Augustus' first projects, almost right after the Battle of Actium, which took place in 31 BC. The mausoleum was commissioned in 28 BC. The top of the Quirinale hill, the highest hill in Rome, the imposing Quirinal Palace, a former summer residence of popes, later the seat of the Italian kings. The obelisk bears naturally the same name as the hill and the palace, the Quirinal Obelisk, ladies and gentlemen. It's 14.8 meters high and doesn't have any inscriptions. Interestingly, the obelisk doesn't feature a pyramidion at its top, but ends flat. It's undetermined if it was designed that way, or perhaps the pyramidion, quite a fragile element, fell off at some point in the past. The round basin was used as a fountain during Roman times. The sculptures flanking the obelisk date back to the 2nd or 3rd century AD. They present the Dioscuri, mythical figures Castor and Pollux.
You're in Rome and got too many itineraries to pick from? Just take a map, find all the obelisks, connect with line, and here you go. The best route through Rome with all most important places.
The origins of twin obelisks are rather vague, although some sources suggest that the monoliths were made in the 4th century BC and brought from Egypt. Most scholars date the obelisks to a time frame between the 1st century BC to the 1st century AD and are convinced of their Roman rather than Egyptian origin. The second obelisk is situated on the Esquiline hill, a little over a kilometer from the Quirinale. It's indeed almost identical with the one we've just seen. It measures 14.75 meters, bears no inscriptions, and also lacks the pyramidion. Nevertheless, its placement is quite unique. Unlike the obelisk we've seen always in front of the sacred or secular buildings, this one stands behind the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore. The man behind this peculiarity is Pope Sixtus V, whose villa was located nearby, and the obelisk enabled the entrance to the papal private residence. Officially, however, he claimed that it was intended to serve as a guide for pilgrims coming from the north. Before the sunset, I have to show you the largest standing obelisk in the world, the Lateran obelisk. It initially weighed 413 tons, but because of its abandonment and collapse in the 5th century, it had to be restored, and as a result, it now weighs around 300 tons and measures around 32 meters. The Lateran obelisk still holds the title of the tallest ancient obelisk still standing. Made of red granite, it was commissioned in the 15th century BC by the pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, Thutmose III, but was finished more than 20 years later by his grandson Thutmose IV. For almost 2,000 years it stood in front of the great temple of Karnak in Thebes. Only in the 4th century AD it was moved to Alexandria by Constantine, and then by order of the emperor Constantius II to Rome. It was the last ancient Egyptian obelisk to be brought to the Eternal City. Like the Flaminio obelisk brought by Augustus, it was installed in the spina of the Circus Maximus and shared the same fate, abandoned in the 5th century, restored and re-erected by the Pope Sixtus V. The pedestal, which increases the height of the monument to little over 45 meters, bears the 15th century inscriptions, telling us about the history of its recovery and reconstruction, the name of the architect, Domenico Fontana, as well as the dedicatory note to Constantine, who was the defender and protector of the Christian faith. He was the first emperor to be baptized and made the Christianity the official religion of Rome. This engraving also reveals that the obelisk was supposed to be transported from Alexandria to Constantinople, the new Rome, as the inscription says. Constantine's successor, however, decided otherwise. Last today, and as well the last obelisk to be recovered in Rome, only in the 19th century, the Dogali obelisk. A little over 6 meters high, it bears cartouches of Ramesses the Great and belongs to the group of obelisks from the temple of Serapis and Isis. Monumental elegance, perfection of form, and a visible symbol of the divine power of the pharaohs. That's what the mighty Roman emperors and popes simply couldn't resist. Our journey ends on the Lateran hill. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe, like, comment and share my content with your friends. And see you on another ancient site.